On an ordinary Tuesday morning, the Harmon Street Bridge carried its usual weight of the world. Thousands of vehicles stretched bumper to bumper across its 2,000-foot span, the city's pulse beating through every painted lane. Nobody noticed the man standing still near the eastern railing, one hand resting lightly on the cold steel, his eyes closed. He wasn't praying. He was listening. He had sent the warnings 3 times. Nobody believed him. When the CEO stood at the podium and laughed at a single dad with no credentials, the sound that answered her soft, almost polite, came from somewhere deep inside the bridge itself. A hairline whisper, a structural confession. And then, one by one, every car on that bridge stopped moving. Andrew Foster had not always been the kind of man people overlooked. At 26, he had been the youngest structural engineer ever hired by Hartwell Infrastructure Group, a firm whose portfolio included 3 interstate overpasses, a waterfront stadium, and the original load-bearing redesign of the Harmon Street Bridge itself. He had a gift that his professors called almost unsettling, an ability to read a structure the way other people read faces, detecting stress and fatigue in steel and concrete, the way a doctor detects illness in a patient's complexion. He didn't just crunch numbers. He listened. Then the accident happened. It was a Tuesday in March, 4 years before the morning that would change everything. Andrew had been driving home from a late site inspection when a delivery truck ran a red light on Route 9 and hit the passenger side of his car at 40 miles per hour. His wife, Diana, died before the paramedics arrived. Their daughter, Chloe, was 3 years old and strapped into her car seat in the back. She walked away without a scratch. Andrew walked away with a rebuilt left knee, a closed-off expression that strangers sometimes mistook for coldness, and a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. He resigned from Hartwell Infrastructure Group 6 months later and never went back. He told people it was to be home for Chloe. That was true, but the fuller truth, the one he kept to himself, was that something had shifted inside him after the accident, a recalibration of what mattered, what was real, what deserved his time. The corporate world of bridge engineering had started to feel like a performance. Committees and liability reviews, and carefully worded reports designed to reassure stakeholders rather than reflect reality. He wanted to be closer to the actual material, closer to the truth of things. So he took a part-time job with the city's infrastructure maintenance crew. The pay was modest. The work was unglamorous. He wore an orange vest and drove a white utility truck and spent his days checking drainage grates and patching expansion joints and logging surface observations on a clipboard. His former colleagues, the ones who still recognized him at industry events, weren't sure whether to feel sorry for him or admire him. Most settled on a quiet, polite pity. His daughter Chloe, now 7, was none of those things. She was sharp and watchful, and had her father's habit of paying close attention to what other people missed. She kept a nature journal filled with pressed leaves and hand-drawn maps of their neighborhood. She asked questions that made grown adults pause. On weekday mornings, she sat across from Andrew at their small kitchen table, eating cereal and studying his face with the focused patience of someone who had learned early that the most important information was rarely spoken aloud. She was the only reason he still laughed. She was the only reason he slept. Olivia Bennett had been named CEO of Meridian Structural Partners 8 months before the Harmon Street Bridge anniversary. She was 32, which made her the youngest chief executive in the firm's 40-year history, a distinction that multiple profile pieces had noted with the particular breathlessness reserved for women who succeeded faster than expected. She had come up through the finance side of infrastructure development bonds, municipal contracts, project timelines, and she had a formidable talent for translating complex engineering projects into the language of stakeholders and city councils. Her team was full of credentialed engineers, senior architects, and data analysts with expensive software. She trusted their consensus above almost everything else. Meridian had been awarded the Harmon Street Bridge renovation contract 11 months earlier, the capstone of a citywide infrastructure initiative. The bridge was approaching its 25th year of operation, and the mayor's office wanted the anniversary to be a celebration. New lighting, resurfaced lanes, updated signage. A symbolic renewal for a city that had taken some hard years and was presenting itself to the world as something reborn. Olivia understood the assignment perfectly. The project was on schedule, on budget, and generating excellent press. A symbol of sustainable design, one architecture magazine called it. She had the cover framed and hung it in her conference room. Andrew first noticed the sound in late September, about 3 weeks after Meridian's crew had completed the primary resurfacing work. He was doing a routine morning walkthrough on the bridge's eastern maintenance path when a loaded cement mixer rumbled past on the traffic lanes above. The bridge vibrated, as it always did, under heavy load. But this time the vibration had a quality that Andrew registered before he could fully articulate it: an asymmetry, a slight departure from the rhythm he had memorized over years of walking that same path. The resonance was fractionally off, like a piano key that had been tuned a half-step flat. Most people would have heard nothing at all. Andrew stood motionless for 40 seconds, eyes closed, one hand pressed flat against the underside of the lower cord. He came back the next morning with his personal monitoring equipment, a portable vibration sensor, and a small accelerometer he had bought with his own money 2 years earlier, more out of professional reflex than any specific concern. He attached the sensor to the lower cord of the bridge's primary support structure near Pier 4 and logged readings for 3 hours. What he found was subtle, a periodic amplitude spike occurring every 14 to 16 minutes, correlating with the passage of vehicles heavier than approximately 40,000 pounds. The spike was small, but it was consistent, and it was new. Over the following week, he cataloged what he called the secondary indicators. Hairline cracks, the kind that engineers describe as cosmetic, unless they occurred in structurally sensitive locations, were developing at the base of Pier 4's cap beam, precisely where the load transfer from the superstructure concentrated under heavy traffic. He photographed each one with the dated timestamp function on his phone camera. He measured them with a crack gauge and logged the width in millimeters with the precision of someone who had once done exactly this for a living, because he had. He cross-referenced the measurements against the original design specifications that he had helped draft a decade earlier, when he was still at Hartwell. The margins were tighter than they should have been, not catastrophic, but trending in a direction he recognized. He also noted something that the formal inspection reports which he requested through the city's public records portal had not flagged. The resonant frequency of the structure under peak load had shifted measurably from the baseline established in the original engineering survey. Bridges have natural frequencies, the way a tuning fork or a wine glass does. When the natural frequency of a structure begins to approach the frequency of the loads being applied to it, the resulting dynamic amplification can produce stresses far beyond what static analysis would predict. Engineers called it resonance fatigue. It was insidious precisely because it was invisible in photographs, invisible in surface inspections, and easy to dismiss as within normal variation. Andrew compiled everything into a 12-page report. He included his sensor data, his photographic documentation, his frequency calculations, and a conservative projection of how the condition would develop under continued peak load traffic over the next 60 to 90 days. He submitted it to his supervisor at the city maintenance office on a Wednesday afternoon. His supervisor read the executive summary, told Andrew that the bridge had just passed its formal inspection, and filed the report in a physical binder on a shelf behind his desk, without forwarding it anywhere. Andrew asked about it the following week. His supervisor explained that the bridge's engineering was Meridian's responsibility, not the city maintenance crews, and that Andrew's job was surface inspection and minor repair. He said this not unkindly. He said it the way someone explains the boundaries of a role to a person who has been working outside them. Andrew went home that evening and made Chloe dinner and helped her with a school project about weather patterns. After she was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop and began drafting a formal communication to Meridian structural partners. It took 4 attempts to get a response. The first email went to Meridian's general project inquiry address and received an automated acknowledgement. The second, addressed specifically to the project manager listed on the city contract documents, received a brief reply from an administrative coordinator explaining that all public concerns about the Harmon Street project should be directed to the city's infrastructure office. The third was returned by a different coordinator, who informed Andrew that Meridian's engineering team had reviewed the public inspection data and found no basis for concern. The fourth email, which Andrew sent directly to Olivia Bennett, her address was listed on a public press release about the anniversary event, was 2,000 words long. It contained a link to a shared document folder with his full sensor data, his photographic record, his frequency analysis, and his structural projections. He wrote it the way he had once written engineering reports at Hartwell. Without hedging, without apology, with every claim tied directly to a measurement. He sent it on a Sunday night. Olivia read it on Monday morning. Or rather, she began reading it. She made it through the first 3 paragraphs before forwarding it to her senior structural engineer, Marcus Webb, with a note that said, "For your information, public complaint, re. Harmon." "Marcus, is any of this real?" Marcus replied within the hour. His response was 3 sentences long. The monitoring methodology was non-standard. The equipment was consumer-grade. The analysis reflected a misunderstanding of how modern bridge inspection protocols were designed to catch exactly this kind of issue. Olivia considered that sufficient. She wrote back to Andrew the same afternoon with 4 sentences, thanking him for his concern, assuring him that the bridge had received a full professional inspection by credentialed structural engineers, and noting that infrastructure assessments required specialized expertise and accredited methodology. She did not mention his sensor data. She did not mention his frequency analysis. She did not mention his photographs. What she did do, and this was the detail Andrew would think about for years afterward, was use his email as a case study at the following Wednesday's all-hands meeting. She presented it as an illustration of how public anxiety about infrastructure, while understandable, often reflected pattern recognition errors rather than genuine structural knowledge. A maintenance worker, she told her team, with a tone that was not cruel, but that carried the particular cool dismissal of someone accustomed to filtering signal from noise, looking at surface vibration with a consumer sensor and concluding there's a systemic failure. A few people in the room laughed. It was a knowing laugh, the professional's laugh at the amateur's overreach. The Harmon Street Bridge 25th anniversary celebration was scheduled for the 2nd Saturday of November. The city had planned it as a genuine civic event, a ribbon-cutting ceremony with the mayor, live music on the pedestrian walkway, food trucks along the adjacent plaza, and media coverage that Meridian's communications team had helped coordinate. Olivia was scheduled to speak alongside the mayor and the city's director of public works. It was to be the capstone moment of a successful project, the kind of event that turned a contract into a legacy. In the 3 weeks before the event, Andrew watched the bridge get worse. It was not dramatic. It was not the kind of deterioration that would register in a drive-by observation or even a standard visual inspection. But Andrew was on that bridge most mornings, and he had developed a granular familiarity with its behavior that no instrument could fully replicate. He noticed that the crack at the base of Pier 4's cap beam had grown from 0.3 millimeters to 0.7 millimeters in 19 days, a rate of propagation that would have triggered a maintenance review under the standards he had followed at Hartwell. He noticed that the amplitude spikes in his vibration data were occurring more frequently and at slightly lower trigger thresholds, meaning the bridge was beginning to respond to lighter loads with the same dynamic behavior that previously required a heavy truck. He noticed that the midspan deflection, the slight downward bow of the deck under full traffic load, had increased by a measurable fraction. Each observation was individually within some range of interpretive ambiguity. Together they described something that had a name in the field: progressive fatigue accumulation. A bridge in the early stages of this condition could continue to function normally for weeks or months, but the trajectory was not ambiguous to someone who understood it, and the trajectory pointed in one direction. He submitted a second report to his supervisor. This time his supervisor forwarded it up one level to the city's engineering coordinator, who reviewed it and issued Andrew a formal written caution. Employees of the maintenance division were not authorized to conduct independent structural assessments or communicate findings externally without departmental approval. The caution was politely worded. It was also unambiguous. Andrew filed it in the same folder where he kept Olivia's 4-sentence reply. That evening, Chloe found him at the kitchen table with his laptop open and his photographs spread across the surface. She sat down across from him and looked at the pictures for a long moment: the cracks in the concrete, the measurement gauges, the graphs of vibration data, with the focused, unsentimental attention she brought to everything. "Is the bridge broken?" she asked. Andrew was quiet for a moment. "It's getting there," he said. "Did you tell someone?" "I told a lot of people." She considered this. "What did they say?" "They said I didn't know what I was talking about." She was quiet for a moment, studying the photographs. Then she said, "But you do know what you're talking about." It wasn't a question. Andrew looked at his daughter for a long time. "Yeah," he said. "I do. So what are you going to do?" He didn't answer that night. But he already knew. 10 days before the anniversary event, Andrew bought a small video camera with a wide-angle lens. He spent 2 mornings mounting it to the maintenance access frame below Pier 4, angled to capture both the crack cluster and the lower chord of the primary support beam. He let it run for 6 hours each day during peak traffic. The footage showed, with unmistakable visual clarity, what his measurements had been documenting for weeks. A visible flex in the lower chord under heavy load that was inconsistent with the design specifications, and a hairline crack that opened fractionally, briefly every time a loaded truck crossed the adjacent span. The opening was less than a millimeter. Under normal circumstances, it would mean nothing. At Pier 4, given the existing crack propagation pattern and the load transfer geometry, it meant something specific. He compiled the video, his sensor data, his photographic record, and a revised structural analysis, this one annotated in plain language, with every technical term defined, every calculation shown step by step into a single document. It ran to 31 pages. He sent it to Olivia Bennett by certified electronic mail with a read receipt. He sent a copy to the city's Director of Public Works. He sent a copy to the State Department of Transportation's Bridge Safety Division. He sent a copy to 2 structural engineering professors at the State University whose research he had followed, and who, he knew, would recognize what they were looking at. He also sent a copy to his former colleague at Hartwell, a woman named Sandra Reyes, who now ran her own consulting firm, and who had once told Andrew that he had the best structural intuition she had ever encountered in a professional engineer. Olivia received Andrew's 3rd submission on a Thursday. The anniversary event was 11 days away. She forwarded it to Marcus Webb again. This time Marcus's reply was longer, 3 paragraphs instead of 3 sentences. He acknowledged that some of the frequency data was atypical, and suggested scheduling a supplementary visual inspection before the event, as a precautionary measure. He estimated the inspection would take half a day, and would almost certainly confirm that the structure was within acceptable parameters. Olivia scheduled the inspection for the following Wednesday. Then she reviewed the event timeline, confirmed that the mayor's office had finalized the speaking order, and approved the catering vendor for the plaza food trucks. The supplementary inspection was on her calendar. The event was on her calendar. They did not feel like the same category of thing. Wednesday's inspection was conducted by 2 members of Marcus Webb's team. They spent 3 hours on the bridge, examined the crack cluster at Pier 4, reviewed the deck deflection data, and produced a 4-page summary. The summary noted the hairline cracks as a monitoring item, recommended sealing them with epoxy injection within 60 days, and concluded that the structure was safe for continued use and for the planned anniversary event. Marcus sent Olivia a brief note. As expected, cosmetic issues. Event is fine. Olivia did not respond to Andrew's 3rd submission. The morning of the anniversary event arrived with the particular clarity of a cold November day, pale sky, sharp light, the kind of air that made the city look freshly assembled. The Harmon Street Bridge was decorated with civic pride, blue and silver banners along the pedestrian railings, a temporary stage constructed on the widened section near the south approach, a small grandstand for dignitaries. Camera crews from 3 local stations had set up on the opposite bank for a wide shot that would frame the bridge and the skyline together. It was, by every visible measure, a beautiful day for a celebration. Andrew Foster arrived early. He wore his maintenance vest because it was the only thing that gave him legitimate reason to be on the bridge structure without question. He had his monitoring equipment in his bag. He had his phone, charged fully, with his documentation folder bookmarked. He stood at the eastern maintenance walkway access point, where the angle gave him a clear view of Pier 4's cap beam and of the stage being arranged on the south approach. By 9 in the morning, the traffic lanes were filling steadily. The event had drawn attention, and the surrounding streets were backing up. Additional vehicles were being routed across the bridge by traffic control, creating heavier than normal load conditions at precisely the worst